Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and, honestly, most controversial tools in a trader's toolkit, Elliott wave theory. We're going to peel back the curtain and see if crowd psychology really does create predictable patterns in markets that are supposed to be random. Let's get right into it.
So, let's just start with this one big question. You've probably heard it a million times. The market is random, it's chaotic, you can't predict it. But is that really true? What if underneath all that noise, there's actually a rhythm, a pulse, driven by something we all understand: human emotion? And that really gets us to the core idea here. The entire foundation of Elliott wave theory is that markets are anything but random. They're actually a reflection of us, of the collective psychology of every investor out there. These massive waves of optimism and pessimism that, believe it or not, create patterns that repeat over and over again. So what exactly is Elliott wave theory? Well, think of it as a method for reading the market's mood. It's a way to identify these big market cycles and maybe even get a sense of where trends are headed. And the key, the absolute key, is that it's all based on these repeating fractal wave patterns that are a direct map of investor psychology. You know, this isn't some newfangled idea. Way back in the 1930s, a guy named Ralph Nelson Elliott went through decades of data on the Dow Jones. And what he found was pretty mind-blowing. The market was following these specific, repeating patterns over 80% of the time. He realized he wasn't looking at random noise. He was looking at a chart of human hope and fear. Okay, so how does this actually work? How do we see these patterns on a chart? It all boils down to one fundamental building block. It's called the 5-3 pattern. The theory basically says that market movement only exists in two states. First, you've got impulse waves. These are the strong, powerful moves that go in the direction of the main trend. Then you have corrective waves. These are the pullbacks, the pauses that move against the trend. It's kind of like taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. So this is the 2 steps forward part. An impulse move always has 5 distinct waves. You see, waves 1, 3, and 5 are the engines. They're the ones pushing the price up or down with the main trend. And waves 2 and 4, they're just the market taking a little breather, small pullbacks before the next big push. And here's the 1 step back. After you get that big 5-wave push, the market needs a bigger break. This is a 3-wave correction, labeled A, B, and C. Now, I'll be honest, this is where a lot of people get tripped up, because these corrective patterns can get really complex. They can look like zigzags, flats, or even triangles. Now, this isn't just about finding squiggles on a chart that kind of look like waves. No, this theory has discipline. It's built on 3 cardinal rules, and these are totally non-negotiable. If a pattern breaks even one of these rules, your analysis is wrong, period. You have to start over. All right, rule number 1. This is the bedrock. Wave 2, that first little pullback, can never, ever, under any circumstances, drop below where wave 1 started. If it does, it's not a wave 2. The whole pattern is invalid, right from the get-go. Next up, rule number 2. People often call this the no overlap rule, and it's pretty straightforward. The pullback in wave 4 cannot dip into the price range of wave 1. This separation is what keeps the impulse structure clean and strong. If they overlap, the count is broken. It's that simple. And finally, we have rule number 3. Wave 3 is supposed to be the heart of the move, right? The big, powerful one. So it can never be the shortest of the 3 action waves, 1, 3, and 5. In fact, most of the time, wave 3 is the longest and strongest. So if it looks like the runt of the litter, your count is probably wrong. Okay, this is where the theory gets a serious upgrade. On its own, Elliott wave gives you the basic map. But when you layer Fibonacci ratios on top of it, you start to add a whole new level of mathematical probability. You can actually start to predict where these waves might start and stop. So we use 2 main tools from the Fibonacci toolbox for this. First is retracement. You use that to measure how deep a pullback might go, so you'd use it on wave 2 or wave 4. Then there's extension, which you use to project forward and set price targets for where the next big impulse waves, 3 and 5, might actually land. And what's wild is how specific these relationships can be. For those corrective waves like 2 and 4, analysts are always watching for pullbacks to key levels like 38.2% or the big one, 61.8%. And for the powerful impulse waves, 3 and 5, they're looking for extensions way up at 161.8% or even higher. Let's just zoom in on that one number for a second. 61.8%, the golden ratio.
This level is a huge deal in markets all across the globe. It's funny, the source material points out that in the Thai stock market, for example, this level is super reactive. It just goes to show you how this universal market psychology can still have its own local flavor. So, if the rules are this clear, and you've got Fibonacci to help, why isn't everyone making a fortune with this? Well, because the theory is about market psychology, and that includes the psychology of the person looking at the chart. So let's talk about the common traps and biases that mess everybody up.
It's a totally fair question, isn't it? If there's a roadmap, why do so many people still get lost? Well, the answer usually isn't in the chart. It's in the mirror.
All right, here are the three big ones, the classic mistakes. First, getting totally lost in the weeds, trying to count every tiny little subwave. Second, just plain stubbornness, refusing to admit your count is wrong when a cardinal rule is clearly broken. And third, misreading those super tricky ABC corrections, which can make you buy at the top or sell at the bottom.
But the biggest trap of all? It's psychological. The great irony here is that you're using a theory based on mass psychology while falling victim to your own. It's called confirmation bias. You want to see a perfect five-wave pattern so badly that you just force the chart to fit. You start ignoring all the evidence that tells you you're wrong.
And that brings us to what might be the single most important lesson of this whole thing. We have to completely reframe what Elliott wave theory is, and more importantly, what it is not.
So is it a forecasting tool? Kind of. But is it a crystal ball that tells you the future with 100% certainty? Absolutely not. Its real power, its true strength, is as a risk management framework. It gives you a structured way to think about the market, and crucially, it tells you exactly when your analysis is busted. So how do you actually use this thing effectively? First, don't sweat the small stuff. Focus on the major, big picture waves. Second, use Fibonacci as a way to confirm your ideas, not just to pick targets out of thin air. And most importantly, use those three cardinal rules to set a rock-solid stop-loss. The theory's greatest gift is telling you precisely when you are wrong. And so I'll just leave you with this final thought. Elliott wave theory gives you a totally new lens for looking at the market. It's a shift from seeing just random, chaotic noise to seeing structured, human psychological patterns. And the real question is, once you start to see those waves, can you ever really look at a chart the same way again?